Hello and welcome to another episode of the Game Out Talk podcast. My guest in this episode is Hugo Guerra, who is 40 years old and currently being the VFX supervisor of his own company, Hugo's Desk in London. We will be talking about what young students should focus on to get into the VFX industry and how new hobbies can improve your craft. So without further ado, let's hop right into the talk. Hello and welcome to a new episode of the Game Out Talk podcast. My guest today is Hugo Guerra.
Yep.
Who is a 40-year-old VFX supervisor and the owner of the company Hugo's Desk. Hello, Hugo.
Hello. Hi there, Christopher.
So maybe you could introduce yourself.
Yeah.
Most of the people will know you, but just tell us a short story of your life or of you.
I'll try to keep it short because I like you said, I think most people already know my past. But first of all, thank you so much for having me. It's always a pleasure to do these kind of programs. I really like to do podcasts, really enjoy it. So thank you so much for inviting me. But yeah, I'm Portuguese. I'm 40, like you said. I am a bit getting old now. I've been working in the industry for 20 years now. So I started in Portugal. I did an art degree. Back then, there weren't any visual effects degrees, so I did the fine art masters. That's what I have, a 5-year masters in painting and video art. And of course, video art doesn't really pay the bills. So while I was at university, I started doing corporate films, started doing music videos for local bands, and even worked as a local camera operator. I did a lot of camera operator tasks in around the university. That kind of evolved. I went to Lisbon. Then after my university degree was done, I opened a company there. Didn't really work out very well. Portugal is a very tiny market. So I for a few years, I did some TV commercials. I did some short films. Didn't really work out in terms of financials. So I left. Sent my showreel to every place I could think of. This was when I was still 20. A lot of companies responded. The company that gave me the best deal was a company in Sweden. So I went to Sweden, worked for 4 years on a company called Animac AB. They still exist, but they don't really do visual effects anymore. They've shifted gears a bit. I started as a composer. Back then I started as an After Effects composer. That was because while I was at university, After Effects and Premiere were my jam. Basically, After Effects 3 and Premiere 2 and 3 as well. That was like a really old version of After Effects and Premiere. And I basically went to this company in Sweden, became an After Effects artist. Then it kind of evolved over the 4 years I was there. I evolved from After Effects to Fusion, and then from Fusion to Shake, and then Shake to Nuke. I basically just kept switching. And eventually I became an art director on that company. And that's when I left really the company. I was art directing projects. We did everything. We used to do corporate films, TV commercials. We also sometimes did print. We did a bunch of stuff. I learned a lot while I was there. It was kind of like my training ground because it allowed me to learn Final Cut and learn Photoshop and learn After Effects and learn Premiere and learn Nuke and Fusion. I just tried everything. I was like 20 something, so I had a very eager mind to learn things. Then I left because as much Sweden is now Sweden this moment is a powerhouse of visual effects, but back then it wasn't. So I kind of left. I went to the powerhouse of Europe, which was London. Back then, London was the biggest place. It isn't anymore. There's a lot of places these days. But London was the biggest place. This was 2008, 11 years ago. Moved to London, got a few gigs as a VFX supervisor. I already had a lot of experience in Sweden being on set. Did a few jobs for the BBC, supervising some children TV shows called MI High, and then started becoming a freelancer. I worked for a few years at Nexus Productions, doing a lot of CG compositing for commercials. Then I moved to the Mill, where I was also a freelancer, did a lot of very advanced compositing as a senior composer at the Mill, was there for a few years. Then I kind of started becoming a freelancer, so I kind of bounced from the Mill, Jellyfish Pictures, Nexus, just started bouncing from company to company. Eventually, the head of Nuke at the Mill, which was a brand new department the Mill did, because the Mill was a Shake company, the head of Nuke at the Mill left the Mill, and I was there as a freelancer, and then the company offered me the job, and I became the head of the Nuke department together with another artist called Juan Brockhaus. We were both heads of Nuke. He was from the 3D background, and I was from 2D background. Stayed at the mill for 5 years as the head of the Nuke department. The Nuke department became quite big. We had about 40 people at some point. We did hundreds of productions where I supervised on set and supervised the productions, did the compositing, did the conforming, all sorts of commercials. You know, we did commercials for Call of Duty Ghosts. We did commercials for Howdy, Hummingbird. We did commercials for the BBC. We did some for Nike, for Adidas, all the big brands, because the mill always attracts like the best brands in the world.
Okay.
Had a lot of fun there. The mill is a really great place to work. Met a lot of amazing artists there. But it was my time to leave, you know, because was a huge gamer, so I kind of really wanted to like put my foot more into the video games industry. We did a few trailers for games while I was at the mill, but it wasn't enough for me, so I kind of left and became a director, really. Like, started to try to pitch for work and started doing my own jobs. That's where Fire Smoke comes along. Started like working with them as a director, doing cinematics, doing trailers, doing all sorts of things for a lot of AAA games, as you can see on my website. And now these days, I'm still working with them as a director, but I also have my Hugo's Desk channel, which is taking more and more of my time with a lot of different things. I have courses that I do on Hugo's Desk. I have my channel. I have my Patreon as well. So the Hugo's Desk brand is growing and growing. But you guys can go into my website and check more of my stuff. Like, all my work is there. It's hugo-guerra.com. Unfortunately, I do not have the hugoguerra.com domain. That is from someone older than me. It's a guy in Chile. He's actually an hairdresser. He has hugoguerra.com. So I couldn't get my own domain. But yeah, so if you go to hugo-guerra.com, you can see all my work and you can see all my latest stuff. It's always there.
Yeah. I will put this in the info box as well, so should be no worries. So you started out back in the 90s. So how was university back then? You said there was not a real VFX industry. So
No.
you started out as a traditional artist, right?
Yes. So I did a 5-year degree, master's in arts. So, you know, I learned how to paint, how to draw. I was already doing that in secondary school as well.
Okay.
I always did arts there. I've always had I always drawing, doing comic books, doing a lot of those things. So I ended up learning how to paint, how to sculpt and we also had a brand new discipline called video art, because computers were just starting to appear in Portugal. We were using very old computers. We were using Macintosh G3s, Macintosh G4s as well. Using Matrox video cards and basically developing, video art using mini DV cameras, really, all in standard definition, really. So that's how I kind of like started. There wasn't any visual effects training back then. You couldn't really go to YouTube. That didn't exist. There were no schools like Scape Studios or FX PhD that didn't exist either. So I had to learn myself. You know, I learned After Effects by myself. I learned Premiere by myself, you know, by reading the manual, which are really big books, like they're huge. Reading the manual and just trial and error, really. There's no other way, because you didn't have YouTube to go and check, or you didn't have Google to check if it was correct or not.
Check for feedback, or
No, or even to check like, oh, what does this do? You didn't really have Google. Back then I had Alta Vista and internet was very expensive and it was not easy for you to just go into the net and search these things, you know.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you create trailers for games. So what does this trailers make special? You only have like 3 minutes time to get the players or the buyer's attention, as better said, to advertise the game, to make the game look new, super good, super fresh, super clean. So how do you deal with this 3 minutes?
Well, we sometimes we have less than 3 minutes though. Like sometimes we have a minute, sometimes we have
some teasers.
It really that's why I've left the mill because of this, because I really wanted to be part of working more into the creative side. Because at the mill, of course, we were at the end. You know, the directors were already with everything ready, and then we would just do the visual effects. So by being a director of these things, I can work with the games company very early on and develop concepts, develop scripts, develop storyboards, and develop a story that would uh, tell what the game is. Usually it always starts with some kind of pitch. We usually do a pitch, either presentation in Keynote or a PDF or a video. We kind of give them the idea because we do a lot of we play a lot of games, so we always know what these games are. So we always have a lot of good references, both from films and from games. So we present what we feel like the game is. Then they say yes or no. Then we work with the developers. They show us the game. We usually get the games very early on. We get the alpha builds of the game. We try the game out. The game usually is not finished already. And we kind of feel the feeling of the game and then develop a script that would work. It's always a very collaborative effort, you know, working with the developers, working with the director of the game, working with the marketing department of the AAA industry. So that's kind of how it operates. And then once everyone is approved and everyone likes the idea, we start production. And then when we start production, then it becomes just like what we did at the mill. It just becomes a normal production where we have the normal stuff, CG, you know, rendering, lighting, modeling.
Standard pipeline.
Pipeline. But I just want it to really be in this beginning because that's what I used to do when I was in school. You know, when I was at university, I was doing video art, I was doing short films, and I kind of missed being part of the creative process in the beginning. So that's kind of how it really worked. But it's a good question what you asked, because it is tricky for you to explain the game, and I'm not mentioning any names, but sometimes the game is not as good, or you know, sometimes the game is not very good, so it's tricky for you to do a compelling trailer that works. Sometimes the game is very good, and then it's also tricky because there's a lot of competition or there's a lot of hype around the game. So it's a tricky thing, definitely. There's a lot of competition out there, a lot of really good companies making really good trailers as well.
Yeah. Okay. So how do you see the supply for VFX in the games industry as a general? Would you say that it is increasing or decreasing? How is it developing over the years?
Well, inside the games industry, visual effects is something else. So they call visual effects what we in the visual effects industry call Houdini, particles, and smoke and fire. That's what they call VFX. So whenever you work with the games industry and you see the credits of a game, you see VFX artists. That's what it means. It means people that do basically particle work. So I can't really use the same naming as I usually work with visual effects. But for me, I think it's not growing or decreasing. The demand for trailers and in-game cinematics has always existed. And sometimes we do the trailers for a marketing purpose, you know, if you're trying to promote the game to sell it. And that means it's basically doing a commercial or doing a CG film to have either on YouTube or on a TV channel. And on that situation, it's just like any other commercial of any other brand. You know, you're basically making a branded film about the game. On the other hand, I've also done a lot of in-game cinematics, and that's a bit different. That's when you work with the game engine, you work with the game engine, or you pre-render parts of the game engine, or sometimes you even do full CG for the in-game cinematics. And that way, you work together with the developers and actually create the story, or create the story with them. You know, sometimes we write the story. Sometimes, give an example on Homefront, for example. We, both me and our team at Fire.Smoke, we created all the lore of the intro. We created a lot of the lore inside the game. We created a lot of documentation for the game. We created websites for the game. We created trailers in-house, in-game cinematics as well. So sometimes it's a full package of things. In terms of visual effects, I think there's a big demand because you can probably notice that there's more and more live action trailers happening, both inside the game or outside the game. You also have a huge increase of full CG in-game cinematics and full CG trailers as well outside the game. So a standard visual effects pipeline is very used on that sense, because as soon as you do a live action trailer or do a CG trailer, you're back into a standard visual effects pipeline. You know, you're basically using Maya, Houdini, using Redshift or Arnold, or you just go back to that. But lately, I've also been using a lot game engines. You know, a lot of the games these days, especially when I work with Ubisoft or I work with Square Enix, they have their own proprietary engine, you know, and a lot of times we do use their engine to output renders because their engine has settings, you know, so you can still render to an EXR the result of an engine. So imagine you prepare all your engine and basically you output an EXR, and you can even output AOVs and multiple passes from the game's engine. Most of the engines do that, even the proprietary ones from Ubisoft and Square Enix and Sony, which is the proprietary ones we use. If it's Unreal, then it's even easier because that's even easier to find. So we kind of use the engine as a regular renderer. You know, we just render it in 4K, we render with all the settings in full, and then we render all the AOVs and then try to comp it again. That happens a lot, so we can polish up the trailer and it's still faithful to the game because it's still the same game engine. Or sometimes we use assets from the game. Sometimes we import the actual assets in rigs from the game into Maya so we can develop a visual effects pipeline. So I think it's very connected, you know, it is, because a lot of the skill set is the same. You know, modeling is the same, and rendering is the same, and finishing is the same. Even from a compositing point of view, it's also the same, because in compositing, you're basically finishing the shot with a nice look and flares and light wrapping and a nice matte painting on the background. In a games engine, you also do all those things, but you just do them live. You know, you can tweak the grain, you can tweak the lens flare. All those things are kind of sliders live. And there's also a huge work done on the camera animation, because you have to put your camera angles, you have to do cinematic angles, you have to introduce some realism into the camera with a nice lens. So I really think they are very connected. Visual effects and games you can easily jump from one to the other, I believe, you know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So you work at home, right?
Yes, for the last 3 years I do. I have an office in my house, so it's not really just like a bedroom. It's like an actual office where I have multiple computers. I have 6 computers on this office, you know, because I have a small render farm, and I have, of course, all the capabilities that you normally have in a grading suite. You know, I have like a vector scope. I have professional grading monitors. I have a color surface. I kind of replicated basically what I used to have at the mill on a suite. I replicated on my house. The reason I'm working from home is really because my team on my company is mostly in different countries, you know. I have people working all over the world. I have a compositor called Bjorn. He lives in Iceland. That's where he lives and has been working with me for 2 years. I also have a 3D artist that works a lot with me called Martin Mayer. He lives in Austria. I also have a Portuguese compositor called Ricardo. He works from Portugal, from Porto. Often I have a Swedish compositor helping me out called Joachim. He lives in Stockholm. He lives not in Stockholm anymore. He lives north of Sweden. Sometimes I have animators that work from Germany as well. I also have Wen Brockhaus that works from Germany for me as well. Also have people here in London as well that work from their own offices. Sometimes these people have their own offices. Like, for example, one of my matte painters works in New Zealand. He has his own office. He doesn't work from home. He has an office for himself, but he's working for remote clients, you know. So it's a collection of people that either are working from their homes or working from a off location, like an office. But that's kind of that's the pipeline that I've developed. Ever since I left the mill, after working for 10 years inside companies, you know, and having to be there from 9 to 5, I really became very tired of that, because it's very tiring, because sometimes there's not a lot of work around, or sometimes there's too much work to do, and I really don't operate very well with a 9 to 5 clock, you know, because sometimes you're not as creative as you are at 9 o'clock, but maybe you are at 1, or maybe you're at 5 o'clock. So I got used to now working when I want to or when I need to, depending on the deadlines I have. And I know it's a luxury, but it's just like, for me, it makes sense for you to work when you need, you know.
You're more efficient, right?
Exactly, because sometimes I might stay 3 or 4 days doing really hard hours, and then maybe I can spend the whole week without doing anything, you know. So I think it's much better for my health, and it's much better for my time management as well, and also to deal with my family, and also like to deal with having free time as well. And that's why I did that. And I spent a long time creating a very robust pipeline to be able to do this. So the pipeline I have currently, completely custom made in Python, is a pipeline that operates between Nuke, Maya, and Houdini. And anyone, anywhere around the world, as long as I give them a login and a password, they can boot up my system and they can be part of our pipeline. That means they have the same software, the same plugins, they have the same paths. Like everything is mapped. So if an artist opens a shot in New Zealand, they open up the shot on their computer, and the Python pipeline automatically maps everything for him. It's basically idiot-proof at this time.
Pre-configured, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's all pre-configured, so you just log in, and the shot is there. And as soon as you save, the shot is for everyone. Like, it's all synced automatically. The only thing that I request of my artists and the team that works with me is really for them to have a fast internet. That's the only thing. And so when people usually work with me, they tend to have to upgrade their internet to the maximum they can find. That's usually the case. Yeah. But that's
I got you.
Yeah. That's kind of how I've been operating. And it's been very nice to work from home and to work on my own time. And I think that I've reached the phase in my life, I'm 40 now, I just don't really feel like going to the office. But I do need to say to anyone that is starting on their careers now, that they should not start working from home like I have done. They should start on a company first. The only reason I'm working from home now is because I have 20 years experience.
That's it. Yeah. You
Yeah.
can afford this to do this. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I have the experience to be able to manage and supervise the project. And all the people that work with me also have 20 years of experience. All these people have worked for years, some of them at MPC, at Framestore, at DNEG. They are very experienced people. So they are reliable, they are professional, and they are people that know what they're doing. And that's why it works so well remotely. You do not want to hire new people for this kind of environment, because new people that are very young, never been on a company, will not fit well. And I really advise everyone in their life, on their career, at least once, try to work on a very big facility. It's the biggest advice I give to everyone. The fact that you would go and work at least for a year or two at Framestore or DNEG or ILM or the Mill, any of these big places, it will give you a level of quality, professionalism, and just the learning, the teachings you'll learn by being there, talking with these artists, will increase your quality tenfold. Everything you learn on university will just become irrelevant because you will learn so much inside these companies. So I would always advise everyone to at least try to do that, just like I did. My dream when I was very young was always to work at the mill, and I've done that. I was there for 5 years, and it's time for me to move on, But it's important for you to try to do that. Otherwise, you will not be a good remote artist or a good artist in the long run, because you need to know the pipeline in and out for you to be able to create one,
So would you say
I
that
talk too much? I'm sorry about that.
No, it's completely okay. That's what the podcast is for, man. Would you say that going to university is a big advantage, or would you say that staying at home for 2 years and being on your own and just grinding in with tutorials and workshops is the better way to go in the industry?
I know this is controversial. A lot of people think that university is not needed, and that people should just do some FX PhD and go for it. I am really against that. I am against that, maybe because I'm older and because I have a background in arts. One of my biggest problems when I deal with artists, even when I was at the mill, because I was the head of Nuke, so I would hire people,
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of artists, even senior artists, have a huge lack of knowledge in regular, like basic stuff. Like even people that are seniors, people that are, oh shit, this guy is like the biggest composer in the world. I've met people like this that do not know their lenses, they do not know photography, they don't know color theory, they don't know composition. These basic things need to be learned on a theory-based academical place, like in university or school. I really believe that. It's incredibly important for you to know photography, for you to know composition, for you to know color. You need to know these things if you're going to be a successful artist. There's no way around it. And no matter And that's one of the biggest problems I see. I see a lot of artists just becoming very skilled artists, technical artists, but they don't really know the real theory behind things. And then there's a shortcoming, because then when they're really facing a project, I see this all the time in commercials, for example. As soon as you get someone in that doesn't have that kind of background, they stumble because they are not able to create something pretty or beautiful. They have to be told what to do, you know? And of course, that's the position of the supervisors. So the supervisors are always there to help, and the creative directors of the project and the directors. But it would be so much more beneficial for everyone if you already know, basics in photography and basics in color science. It's funny that you're saying this. Like, I just noticed, like, I have a big connection with DNEG. I know a lot of people there, and DNEG for a few years now has their own academy inside the company, you know. And the reason they did this is because they really believed that the schools were not giving enough to the students, you know. So they've developed their own students. They basically, all the juniors and all the, and DNEG is not the only one. Most big companies these days have their own academy. MPC has it as well, ILM as well. Even the Mill has that. So and the reason for that is really because they want to teach more stuff. And even a few days ago, I saw a post on LinkedIn where DNEG was basically teaching the compositor department the basics of what bokeh is. You know, bokeh defocus. Basically, when you have defocusing and you have the shape of the blades of the lens on the defocusing. And they brought in a
real
photographer.
basics.
Yeah, they brought in a photographer, and the photographer actually developed a real size bokeh example. He had like a flashlight, he had a little hole on a cardboard with a shape, and then he was basically representing what a light and a lens does, you know, physically. And this is so important. These kind of concepts, these are the typical things you learn on university, you know. If you go to university, you learn these academical things. And I've met a lot of artists that don't want to care about those things. They just want to know where to press the button. And it's so much more than pressing the button, you know. That's why I think people should go to university, because I am not a good visual effects artist because I know Nuke well. It's not because of that. Because I've worked for 20 years. I've worked in After Effects, Fusion, Shake, Nuke, and I'm sure that in a few years there will be, I don't know, Fandango 2000, the new application, you know, something else will show up. And all my artistry can be moved from software to software because I know the basic concepts of light, the basic concepts of gamma, of f-stops, of multiplication, all these concepts that are stable on every, alpha channel, all these things that are complete basic stuff. And that's what allows you to jump from application to application. That's what allows you to become a really good artist. So yeah, I really am against people trying to just learn by themselves. And it's very difficult for you to learn by yourself the academic stuff because there's so much out there. How do you even start? You know, you kind of have to be curated. That's why you should go to university, because you get curated to which books you should read. You get curated to what you should actually learn, because there would be teachers there teaching you that, you know. I think an university degree on the visual effects industry is very important. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much. So would you have any advice for ongoing artists who want to make it in the VFX industry?
So there's a lot of things I would say, but I think if they haven't had the time or the money or to go to university, at least then start to learn other things that could help you on your industry. You know, as easy as you can maybe sign up for a workshop in photography, or you can sign up for an online course in photography, or maybe an online course about color theory or even lighting, or basically try to learn extra things that would help you as a compositor or as a lighting artist or as a modeler, you know. For example, I've met a lot of modeling artists that became even better modeling artists after doing workshops in sculpting, you know, because they became better at sculpting in clay, and then they became better at ZBrush because of that. I've met a lot of illustrators and matte painters that became a lot better after doing a lot of live drawing, you know, nude drawing or live drawing of subjects. And there's a lot of places in the cities usually that you can sign up for these kind of workshops, you know. I've also met a lot of really talented compositors that became so much better after doing a photography course. Even if it's a standard photography course, like a wedding course or a fashion course, it doesn't really matter, but anything that allows you to learn how the camera operates and the f-stops operate and the shutter speed operates. So I really would advise all of you to just learn an extra trade to complement what you're trying to learn. So if you're a rendering artist, if you're a lighting artist, you should really go and learn photography. If you're a compositor, the same. Or composition or color theory. If you are a colorist, you should definitely go and learn color theory, like from basic books and everything, or even learn some cinematography as well. If you are a ZBrush artist, you should know sculpture. All these things are really, really important, I think.
So you would say that those activities or those hobbies are making you a more complete artist to deal with more harder stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I would call it.
They do, yeah, they do, because it allows you to think out of the box. And not only that, it gives you the basic knowledge to solve some problems that you might be stuck. It also allows you to do another thing. Having those hobbies or those extra things allows you to leave visual effects for a moment. It's so important for you to leave because a lot of people are so busy. They're just working and working and working and working, and then they never develop themselves. They never try to learn new things, and they can kind of stagnate very easily in the industry, you know? It's important for you to free your mind by not thinking about visual effects for a few hours a day or a week, you know? And if you have a workshop like that, for example, if you go to live drawing, then it's like a few hours a week that you are not thinking about your comp. You're thinking about drawing that subject. So it's another artistic thing that you're doing, but it's not related to your job. It's important for you to do other artistic stuff. I've even met people that, you know, became very good musicians, and that opened the door for them to become even better editors, you know, because it's so relevant. Music and editing is so relevant. So there's a lot of complementary skills that you can really learn, you know.
So talking about skills, do you have any modeling skills or any texturing skills? How is your pipeline completely working? You know?
Well, I do not have modeling skills in terms of I do not do modeling. No,
Okay.
I'm much more linked because of my 2D background. I'm much more linked with lighting, really. So I'm not very.
Sorry.
When I need something modeled, I basically hire a very skilled modeler to do it. That's how it works. But my pipeline includes everything. Yes, I usually have artists that do all those tasks, from ZBrush to modeling to anything. So.
Okay. So you're kind of the connection between all those skills.
It is, because I usually operate on my productions. I either operate as a director if I'm having completely creative control, or if I don't have complete creative control, I'm operating as a VFX supervisor. And a VFX supervisor usually supervises everything and basically make sure everything is according to the vision on the script that we were trying to achieve. So that's usually what I try to do. Of course, I also try very hard to still be on the box and still work a lot. So I still comp my own shots. I still do most of my compositing, all my grading. And that's also been something that I started to miss while I was at the mill. When I became the head of the nuke department and then a VFX supervisor at the mill, I started having half of my time in meetings and management, and the other half was artist, you know, to a point that I would spend the whole day having meetings, and then I would have to stay late to just keep up with the work I had to do, you know. I really missed that, because in essence, I'm an artist, you know, so I want to do work. So that's why even to this day, if I'm directing something, I'm still comping it, and I'm still finishing the shots, and I'm still grading them, even though I'm 40 and I've been doing it for a long time. I just feel like I have to, and it's so much easier for me to finish the shots than trying to explain someone else how to finish them, you know?
Okay. So how is it today are you having lots of conferences and all those stuff, talking to people, or are you more artist now?
These days,
So
I'm more artist. Yes, I
you
think I talk a lot less. Yes, I am on. I have the luxury to be able to kind of choose the jobs I do right now. So I don't take every job. I usually only do one job at a time. Because there's a lot of other things I do. When I introduced myself, I didn't explain that I also have kind of a second life on teaching. I do a lot of teaching. I go to universities to do lectures. I do a lot of events. I go and talk at events like FMX and View Conference and Visual Effects Festival. And I always, IBC, always travel the world doing a lot of talks for different companies. And so I do a lot of academical work and a lot of teaching. And also I have a YouTube channel that has a lot of videos called Hugo's Desk. So for me, it's important to balance things because the academical side of my work is very merged and linked with my real work because it's all connected. Every time I do a trailer, that's the material I use on my YouTube channel. And so it's all connected. And also being able to, because I have to teach and because I go to universities and because I do lectures, I have to be on the top of my game. I have to always be on top of these applications, always learning the latest techniques and always learning everything. So by being a teacher half of my time allows me to be a better artist because I'm always learning all the time. I never stop learning. And that's one of the problems that sometimes you have if you work only on the jobs, only on the projects. So
when you're on tour, are you working on artistic stuff, or are you kind of linking out, or
no,
just
I
just being
do.
on tour and you
I,
do?
I do
Okay.
I do. Sometimes I take the work with me. Sometimes I use remote to continue. Of course, I continue having dailies with my artists. I have a good pipeline, so sometimes I can have people that can do the work for me while I'm out, and then I can pick it up because we have a very similar pipeline between all of us, so we can actually open all of our jobs and projects between ourselves. So I try to avoid it. When I go out and do tech lectures or talks, usually it's like a few days or a week, 1 week or so. So then it doesn't really make a big difference on the project because usually I scheduled it around my deadlines. So I don't usually, if I'm delivering something, I probably won't go to the event if I'm delivering something.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So I think we are done, Hugo.
Cool.
So I thank you so much for being in my podcast,
No
for
problem.
giving me this huge insight of your career, of your workflow, of your thoughts, of the industry and of artists. And yeah, thank you so much.
No problem. It was a pleasure talking to you. And yeah, thank you so much. And maybe one day we can reverse the thing and you can maybe talk on my YouTube channel as well.
Okay.
Yeah, that'd
Thank
be
you.
nice.
Bye.
Okay, thank you.